When you think of the Netherlands, you often picture water, right? Those iconic canals, maybe windmills managing water levels, an abundance of it.
Absolutely. It's sort of core to the national image.
But a recent warning from the Algemeen Rekenkamer, they're the Dutch government's independent watchdog on spending and policy, well, it paints a very different picture.
Yeah, a really stark one, actually.
They're flagging a looming, significant shortage of drinking water. And look, this isn't some far-off prediction. They're saying it's a current problem,
Right. Some water companies are already facing reserve issues, and unbelievably, dozens of businesses apparently can't even get connected to the water mains right now.
which is kind of shocking for the Netherlands.
Hmm.
So that's what we're diving into today, using a report from Joop covering the Rekenkamer's findings. How did we get here? What are the potential fixes being talked about? And crucially, what does it mean for you?
Well, the Rec and Comer, they certainly don't mince words. They called the policy results so far Zwergelijk
Hmm.
concerning, highlighting the seriousness, the urgency.
Okay, concerning. And what's the bottom line? What needs to happen?
The main call to action is pretty demanding. A 20% cut in water consumption. That's for everyone. Individuals, businesses, they see it as essential to secure future supply.
20%, that's a lot.
It is. And like you said, this isn't just theoretical. The low reserves, businesses being turned away, that's the reality on the ground now. It makes the warning feel much more immediate.
So that 20% target,
Yeah.
it's huge. Let's try and unpack why we're suddenly facing this. It still feels a bit paradoxical for a country known for water management.
It does.
The report mentions increased domestic use, maybe more people working from home. Is that really the main driver, or is there more to it?
Well, working from home definitely adds to it, sure. But a perhaps more significant underlying factor seems to be the impact of the climate crisis.
Oh, yeah.
We're seeing more frequent, more intense droughts. And the risk of those dry spells getting worse, lasting longer, that's a major worry for water availability.
And that adds a layer of complexity, doesn't it? Because the article notes that the PVV, the largest party in the government, denies the scientific consensus on climate change.
Exactly. That inevitably complicates the political response and maybe the willingness to invest in certain long-term solutions tied to climate adaptation.
So where is most of this water actually going? If we need to cut back, who are the biggest users?
Well, look at the numbers. Households. We account for nearly 3/4 of all drinking water use.
3/4.
Really? Yeah. And most of that goes to pretty basic things, showering and flushing toilets.
Right. Things we do every day without thinking much about it.
Precisely. Which also means, there's potential for big savings if habits change or if we use different technologies for those things. That 20% reduction target suddenly seems more tangible when you think about shorter showers, maybe not flushing every single time. Those kinds of adjustments.
Okay, so if that's the usage pattern, what's the government actually planning to do about this? The article mentions Minister Madeleine, who's responsible for water supply. Something about a campaign.
Yes, Minister Madlener's main proposal seems to be a national campaign to create Waterbewustzijn, water awareness.
Water awareness.
Yeah.
Like posters and ads telling us to save water.
Essentially, yes, public education initiatives to encourage more responsible use.
But the Algemeen Rekenkamer, they sound a bit skeptical about whether that alone will do the trick. Is it just that people won't listen, or is there more to their doubt?
Well, their skepticism seems rooted in evidence. They point out there's actually limited proof that these kinds of awareness campaigns lead to significant, lasting changes in how much water people use.
Ah, okay. So good intentions, maybe,
Yeah.
but effectiveness is questionable.
Right. And they also mentioned previous research suggesting that just hiking the price of water isn't necessarily a silver bullet either. It's uncertain how much impact that would really have on its own.
So if awareness campaigns and maybe price hikes aren't the full answer,
Yeah.
what else is on the table? The article mentioned something about alternative water sources for toilets.
That's a really key point being discussed, yeah. The idea of requiring new buildings to use non-drinking water sources like captured rainwater or maybe treated gray water just for flushing toilets?
That makes intuitive sense. Why use perfectly good drinking water for that?
Exactly. It could significantly reduce the strain on our potable water supply, especially long-term as new houses get built.
But the Rekenkamer seems pretty critical about how this specific idea is being handled. Why the criticism there?
Their main issue is the pace. They're concerned it's moving way too slowly,
Yeah.
investigating the feasibility, figuring out how to implement it. They called it verloren tide, lost time.
Lost time. because every new house built without such a system.
Is locking in future demand for drinking water that could have been avoided. It's a missed opportunity, essentially, with every single new construction project.
And they also felt the minister didn't fully grasp the consequences of not saving enough water.
Yeah, they suggested a lack of full understanding of the real-world impacts, like how often businesses are actually being denied connections right now, or housing projects facing delays because of water availability.
It really does sound like a disconnect. The working commenter is sounding the alarm, highlighting urgency, but the response feels slower.
Mm.
And the minister planning to further investigate the findings. It can sound a bit like kicking the can down the road.
That's certainly one interpretation you could take from the report, yes. And just to underscore the potential stakes here, the article briefly mentions situations elsewhere, parts of Spain, parts of France. They've actually had to shut off water supplies temporarily because of shortages.
Wow. That's a sobering thought. It shows this isn't just a Dutch issue, and the consequences can be severe.
It definitely puts things in perspective.
Now, it's interesting to see how the public, or at least the readers commenting on the Jupe article, reacted. Lots of ideas and opinions came through. One reader, Matthias55, brought up Flanders in Belgium.
Right, the Belgian example.
Yeah, apparently rainwater buffers for new builds have been mandatory there for, what, over 20 years? Collecting rainwater for toilets, washing machines, with automatic backup. Why isn't something like that standard here, do you think?
That's a great question raised by Matthias55. It shows these solutions aren't pie in the sky. They exist, they work right next door. Why not here? Well, it could be a mix of factors, maybe historical infrastructure choices, different focuses in building regulations over the years, perhaps industry resistance. It's hard to say definitively, but it does make you wonder why we haven't adopted proven tech like that more widely.
And several other readers really honed in on the toilet flushing issue. Volren called using drinking water for it absurd.
A sentiment many probably share.
And Robin also mentioned Belgium's mandatory gray water circuit for new builds. They acknowledged it might add costs up front, but implied it's just necessary.
Yeah, these comments really show a growing public sense that our current practices are maybe inefficient or even wasteful when it comes to high-quality drinking water. Using it for tasks that don't need that purity level, it just doesn't sit right with a lot of people, it seems. The fact Belgium keeps coming up highlights it as a perceived successful model.
Then there was Remy Talens, who had an interesting point about climate change, saying, yes, we get extreme dry periods, but we also get extreme wet periods now.
Right, the flip side of climate change impacts more intense rainfall sometimes.
So their argument was maybe we need much better rainwater harvesting infrastructure to capture that excess water during wet times. Use it later for toilets, washing, maybe even agriculture.
That touches on a bigger water management question, doesn't it? Are we set up to actually capture and store water effectively when we do get a lot of it? Remy Talens mentioned the past winter and spring being quite wet, so maybe the issue isn't always a total lack of water, but our ability to manage the fluctuations between wet and dry periods.
We also saw some very practical, down-to-earth suggestions. Gauges offered tips like, if it's yellow, let it mellow for flushing, using leftover cooking water for plants, while also expressing frustration at the government. And migrants shared their personal setup using filtered rainwater for their toilet and laundry, and even questioning if everyone really needs to shower every single day.
These comments are great because they show people are engaging on both levels, thinking about big system changes and individual actions. Gage's tips show small habit changes add up, and migrants' experience demonstrates that these alternative systems are feasible even on a household scale right now.
Looking at the supply side for a moment, Willem D2 suggested maybe we should invest more in increasing the drinking water supply itself, pointing to times when the IJssel River has high water levels.
Okay, so looking at boosting supply rather than just managing demand.
Yeah. And conversely, Zokien Vrijing brought up population growth as a key factor driving up the demand in the first place.
Both valid points that highlight the complexity. Reducing demand is crucial, absolutely. But exploring sustainable ways to potentially augment supply, like Willem D2 suggests, is part of a comprehensive look. And Zokien Vrijing reminds us that underlying pressures, like more people needing water, have to be factored into any long-term planning.
And finally, we can't ignore the political context we touched on earlier that definitely surfaced in the comments too. We saw readers like Willem V criticizing Minister Madlener for seemingly prioritizing things like speed limits over the water crisis.
Question priorities.
And PVDB2 expressing general skepticism about whether PVV ministers given the party's stance, would really tackle issues like this effectively.
And it's important we mention those views not to endorse them, but because they were part of the discussion in the source material. They reflect real concerns among some segments of the public about how political stances might impact environmental policy and action on this water issue. The differing views on causes and solutions clearly shape the debate.
Okay, so let's try and bring this all together. It seems pretty clear the Netherlands is facing a genuine, potentially serious drinking water shortage. It's not hypothetical, it's starting now.
Yes, the warnings are stark.
And it looks like it's driven by a mix of things: higher demand, lifestyle changes, but significantly, the growing pressures from a changing climate, particularly drought.
Those seem to be the key drivers identified.
The government's main response so far, focusing on awareness campaigns, is facing, well, considerable doubt from the official watchdog about its likely effectiveness and speed. There's this real tension between the urgency the Reckenkamer sees and the measures currently proposed.
Precisely. That tension is palpable in the report. And look, this isn't just some abstract policy debate. That call for a 20% reduction, it really brings it home to you listening right now.
How so?
Well, it means thinking about your own water use, your showering habits, maybe how often the washing machine runs, even flushing the toilet. These everyday choices, multiplied across millions of households, make up that huge domestic demand we talked about. So, consciously choosing to reduce your consumption, even in small ways, is actually a critical part of tackling this.
Right. It connects the big picture issue directly to daily life.
Absolutely.
So on that note, maybe a final thought for you to consider. We've heard about the urgency, the potential solutions like rainwater harvesting that seem to work elsewhere, the debates about causes, the political context. Given all that, what fundamental shifts maybe in how we think about water, how we value it, and the infrastructure we build around it might actually be needed to ensure the Netherlands does have a secure water supply for the future? Are we prepared for potentially bigger changes than just shorter showers, or will those incremental adjustments be enough?
That's the core question, isn't it? Definitely some food for thought there.